Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for Get Inspired and Live in Your Power. And I have another amazing guest for today's episode, Lynda Sunshine West. Thank you for joining us, Lynda.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, Wileen.
You're welcome. I think we met on LinkedIn. Is that right? And it's
I think
been
so
probably
too.
about
Yeah.
about 3 or 4 months ago, and it's taken us a while to get together on this interview. I just have really wanted to have you on the show because I was so impressed with your story. And after reading your accolades, which I'm going to be sharing with everybody in just a moment, I'm even more impressed and just super excited to work with you on my next book. I
Yes.
Yeah, you're just doing amazing things. So Lynda Sunshine is a book publisher and speaker. She is a 37-time #1 international best-selling author, and I'm a two-time best-selling author. Once is a #1, and I thought that was pretty fancy, but that's amazing. 37 times #1 international best-selling author, and also executive film producer of Wish Man, contributing writer at Entrepreneur Magazine and Brainz Magazine, red carpet interviewer, and philanthropist, and also the founder and CEO of Action Takers Publishing, which is why we met. Thank you for joining us, Lynda.
Thanks for having me, Wileen. And it's interesting because I started with one book too. Okay. So just so you know, I
Everybody
started
starts
with
with the
one.
first one.
Exactly. And, I never imagined myself being a writer at all. I was never into reading. I was never into writing. And then, like, we're going to talk a little bit about my story, but I broke through a fear every single day when I was 51 years old. And after that year was done, my mentor told me, right, I should write a book. And that's the only reason I wrote one. But
Wow.
that was like that catalyst that started me on this, like sharing my story thing. I'm so glad I don't say he made me because nobody can make you do anything, but he made me do it. Okay. And I did it. I'm so glad I did.
That's awesome. It's interesting. You said you were 51. I was 49 when I had a heart attack, and that totally changed the course of my life as
Wow.
well. And a mentor came into my life right at that time, perfect timing. And I actually started doing a lot of breakthrough work myself on fears
Mm.
and limiting beliefs that I had within myself. And so I can totally relate to your story. In fact, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that. I know that you shared with me, when you were 5 years old, you ran away from home. And so why don't you talk a little bit about your childhood and your home life and maybe what led up to that?
Yeah, I grew up in a very volatile, abusive, alcoholic household, and at 5 years old, I got this thing that just said to me like, "You can't live here. This is not the right place." And so I ran away. I was gone for an entire week. I went to the neighbor's house. So I was in a safe environment. But for all intents and purposes, this 5-year-old was going to be gone forever. Like I never intended on going back home. What I didn't know is that my mom knew where I was. So as you can imagine, as a 5-year-old, I run away. Nobody comes to get me. What
Wow.
started happening in my own brain is that they don't love me. They don't want me around. That's why they didn't come to get me. And so that belief locked in tight at age 5. And I carried that belief around until 51, which was when I found a life coach and helped me. But it was like after that week, my mom called the neighbor, said, Linda's been gone long enough. You can send her home now. And so when I came home, I came home from that safe environment that I'd been in for a week to that, crazy house with that abuse and everything. And I became riddled with fears. I literally believed my dad was a monster, like a real, like a dinosaur or something. Because he had this furrowed brow and he just was always so filled with anger. And so that right there, that stayed within me for so many decades.
I just feel, I just know that you feel a lot of gratitude for, first of all, the neighbor. And then also, at 51, being able to kind of look back and figure out where all of these fears came from. I think a lot of times, people do go through their lives and they end up being bitter or angry or whatever because of the circumstances that they were born into.
Mm.
Whereas, you were able to pull yourself out of that. And I know that there are listeners that people that are listening right now that can relate to your story of abuse and that volatile childhood. And it kind of feels like a little bit of hope, that if you could do
Yeah.
it, then somebody else could do it too. Then maybe, that person can do it too. So tell us a little bit about what kind of happened between the age of 5 and 51. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
It's kind of a blur, really, because a lot of my childhood I don't remember. Like I personally don't remember running away, and how I found out I ran away was later. My mom, a couple years before she passed away, she told me this story,
Wow.
and then I had that information from her. And I remember when she told me, she's like, I called the neighbor and I said, Linda's been gone long enough. You can send her home now. And my mom laughed about it like it was this funny thing. What my mom didn't know is what happened to me from that situation. It was a funny thing to her, but also I believe, now this is one thing that I had to come to my own belief on because my mom had already passed away by the time I worked with my life coach. But I believe that my mom, first of all, she knew I was safe. And my mom, in her mind, the way she operated, because I look back at it, is that she was thinking that, Linda's going to exercise her independence. I'll let her stay over there for a while and then I'll bring her back home. She knew I was going to be okay, but she just didn't know what was happening to me. If she knew what was happening to me, she wouldn't have done it the same way she did. Definitely.
I think that that's a really good point, that our parents do the best that they know how with the information that they have. And we see the things from a 5-year-old perspective, which, our brains aren't fully developed. We don't have the overview that maybe an adult does. But a child, I've learned this, that in a traumatic situation, where in that situation where you made the decision that nobody loves me, nobody wants me, nobody's coming to get me, that is a traumatic. You think about if a 5-year-old, if that were really true, how traumatic that would be. And that is where those fears and those limiting beliefs really get locked in. And so you're right, if the parents knew, but the problem is we don't know as
Right.
parents, we do the best that we can. So you lived through your life believing that and having those fears. And then at the age of 51, tell us about that pivotal moment, because that's what this podcast is all about, is getting inspired and living in your power, because that pivotal moment was what started you on the upswing to where now you are living in your power.
Yeah, it was like I remember it like it was yesterday. It was August of 2014. I was driving to work, and at that time, I was working for a judge in the Court of Appeals. I had been in the legal field for 20 years, and I had been in the corporate world for 36 years, and I had 49 jobs in those 36 years. So I was looking at I was like, why do I have so many jobs? Running away, running away, running away, just
Yeah.
like I did at 5. Like I was
Yeah.
repeating a pattern. But then I
Mm.
started, I'll go back to what your question in just a minute. But I started asking myself, was I really running away, or was I always running to something better? When I ran away from my house, I was actually
Mhm.
running to a better place, more safe, more secure. All
Mhm.
those jobs, I wasn't really running away. I was trying to better myself because I was bored, and I didn't want to be bored. I didn't want my life to be boring. And so anyway, I was driving to work, working for that judge. I had worked for him for about 13 months, and I was in that traffic that I'd been stuck in for 36 years. And at that time, I was just filled with this anger. Like I still was carrying all that hate and resentment and anger that I had from when I was a kid, carrying that around with me all those years until I'm 51. And I'm in that traffic and I'm like, oh my God, I hate this. I just hate my life. I hate what I'm doing. I hate my job. And when I got to work that day, I saw a Facebook post, and it was from this woman. It said, I'm a life coach. I took some time off. I'm getting back into it, and I'm looking for 5 women who want to change their lives. She was talking to me. And
Wow.
so I raised my hand. I had never invested in myself ever. I raised my hand and I said, I need help because I need to know, like, why am I on this planet? I have no purpose. I have no value. There's no reason for me to be here. That was my true belief. And so I ended up working with her for 5 months. And that was the start of the shifts that started happening in my life because I'm a good student. I did all of my homework. And I really wanted to transform and change desperately. Like I was desperate for change. And that was the start of it. And that was in 2014. And that led up to January 1st of 2015. That day, I woke up after having worked with my life coach for 5 months. I woke up that morning and I said, I have so many fears that are stopping me from living my life. I'm going to break through one fear every day this year. That was a decision I made. And it was one of the greatest decisions I ever made in my life because my entire life has completely shifted from that moment.
That is amazing. 365 fears. That is so amazing. I know that we didn't talk about this, but I feel like our listeners really want to know, how did you do that? What was the process that you went through to break through those fears on a daily basis? Ignite your inner spark and start each day inspired and empowered with my daily GPS process. I'm Wileen Benson. Daily GPS is the best morning meditation and inspired vision technique that has you co-creating your life with your creator. Inspired shortcuts help you focus on the most important tasks to accomplish your goals faster, unleash your true potential, and transform your life into one that will give you ultimate success and fulfillment. Do it now. Visit WileenBenson.com to download your free daily GPS starter kit and start living in your power today.
Yeah. So I woke up literally, that was exactly how it happened. So there was no plan. It was kind of like, I'm going to do this. And that's kind of how I operate a lot of my life, by the way. It's like, I'm just going to do something. I decided what I was going to do is every morning before I get out of bed, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to lay in bed. I'm going to ask myself a simple 3-word question, 365 days in a row. And that question is, what scares me?
Ooh.
And then I'm going to lay in bed and I'm going to wait till the very first fear pops into my head. Because when we ask ourselves a question, the brain searches for an answer. And so my brain was searching for the answer for that day. And then my commitment, so this was a commitment to myself, was that I would break through that fear that day, no matter what it was. I had no idea what fears were going to pop up. I didn't know if it was going to cost me a lot of money. I had no idea, but I'm so glad I did it that way because there was no like, somebody asked me once, did you have a list of fears? Like, no, I didn't even think of making a list, and it was just, I can't explain how incredible it is to go from the person who would sit in the back of the room, the person who would never start a conversation, to be interviewing stars on the red carpet, to be a 37 times, like these things, those accolades that I have, all of those came after the age of 51. That's when my life really started.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know that we have a lot of listeners who are kind of in that age group or heading in towards that age group. And I know that a lot of times, women or people, men, even at that age kind of start thinking it's too late, I'm past my prime. But I just recently said to myself, I'm just hitting my prime. I feel like I'm just hitting my prime
Exactly.
right now. And I'm 60. I just turned 60. So
yeah, me too.
awesome.
I just turned 60 this year. And I was going to say exactly that. Like I'm hitting the stride.
Yes.
For the first time in my life, and I never thought of my age. Like when I, started going on this path, like age was never a thought in my mind. It was like, this is what I want. And just think that those fears were debilitating. Just absolutely debilitating. I'll share with you just a couple of the fears that popped up to show how debilitating these were in my life. A fear to go to a movie theater by myself. That was a fear that day. One of them was to go to a restaurant and when they ask how many in your party, say one. That was a tremendous fear. I wouldn't go shopping by myself. I wouldn't do things by myself. And then when I would go to places, I became an entrepreneur at the same time. And I would have to go to these networking events because they're like, you got to network, you got to network. And I'm like, I hate talking to people. I'm too scared. I had all these fears. And so I would walk into a networking event and I would sit in the back of the room and get on my phone and hope nobody would come talk to me.
Wow.
That's not networking. Or even worse, I would drive to the networking event, get on Facebook in my car and never go inside.
Oh.
That's how scared I was of people. And so I'll share, like, what was all that fear? Well, as I was breaking through those fears, I started doing a lot of analyzing of myself, my life, all this, like, what's a common theme between my fears? And I realized that it was the fear of judgment. It's really one fear. It's not all these different fears. There was one fear, the fear of judgment. If I can break through the fear of judgment, just imagine how my life would be different. And so that's what I started focusing on is on the judgment piece of it. And it was, oh my gosh, it's just been incredible, incredible. I have no fear of judgment. I totally have rid myself of that fear.
I just can feel like the freedom, to actually be able to choose to go someplace and walk in and actually, have a conversation with somebody and maybe even make a difference in that person's life. And yeah, and I know you have a goal, a mission. It's more than a goal, it's a mission to empower 5 million women and men to write their stories. And you
Mhm.
definitely have to talk to a lot of people to get to that many people.
Boy, do we. It's that's like, where did that number come from? Well, originally the number was 50,000. And then I remembered Grant Cardone, he wrote that book called 10X Rule or something like that.
Yes.
And I read the book and I was like, oh, that's right. Grant Cardone says you got to 10X it. So I'm going to 10X it to 5 million. Didn't realize that that's actually 100X. So as I looked at it, I was like, oh, darn, I 100X'd it. But you know what? I'm not going to go back. And so I kept it at that 5 million. I figured that was a number for a reason.
Yeah.
So in 22 months, we published 450 authors, number one international best-selling authors. So we're on our way. We're at the beginning stages. And I got to tell you, it's just been, if I had thought ahead of time, ooh, can I publish 450 people in 22 months? I would have said, hell no. Realizing that I wasn't driving it. I believe in God and God was driving it. And I was just doing the work. That's all. It
You
all
know,
lined up. I mean, it's been perfect, perfect alignment.
yeah, when you do partner with God, this is what I found is that all logic and numbers go out the window. It's like nothing makes sense on paper, and it doesn't have to. If God goes before you, it's like everything works out and everything comes together. All things work together for good. And you look back and you're like, how could that have even happened? And you would never be able to go back and like figure it out because everything just all works together. So I have no doubt that that 5 million is going to come to fruition. I know that you are also really great at creating very positive, uplifting communities. I've been exposed to a community that you have with your authors, and I'm just super excited to be part of that because it is very uplifting. I don't know if anybody that's listening has had this experience as an author, but you do kind of feel like nobody really gets you. Nobody really understands what you're trying to say, and you're trying to get it on paper, and it's like, no, it's not quite that. It's so wonderful when you can find somebody that really understands and is a great sounding board. And I think that's what you've created, not just with you, but with your community. It seems like everybody's really positive and uplifting and kind of helps people stay on track. Is that a fair
Yeah.
assessment?
Yeah. And I want to make a comment there, because when I first started that whole journey back in January of 2015, I decided to host an event, a philanthropy event, where I was going to help nonprofits to grow their nonprofits. And I would bring speakers in. And I remember I'm standing there in front of the stage and I was terrified because I had never spoken in front of people before. But one thing I heard is like, create your own stage if we want a stage. So I created my own stage. So I'm standing up there and I've got this microphone, and I said, like, with such confidence, which was so uncommon for me. And I was like, I just made a life's declaration. And that's from this point forward, I'm going to spend the rest of my life having as much fun as possible, hanging out with positive and uplifting people who are making a positive impact on the planet. And after I said that, my brain started going crazy, like, how dare you say that? Who do you think you are? You don't deserve it. That's what started going through my head. But then after the event was done, about 6 women walked up to me and said, what was your life's declaration? I want to write that down because I love that. And what I didn't know was I was manifesting that into my life. I didn't know I was doing that. But that's why I'm surrounded by these extremely positive, uplifting people, motivational, like the people I'm surrounded by are just absolutely incredible. And I, bring other people to them. And it's a really important piece for me because remember, my greatest fear was the fear of judgment because
Wow.
that was my greatest fear. My goal is to create a judgment-free environment because I don't want to be surrounded by judgment. So why would I bring judgment into my world? So anytime I host events, like one of the things I do like to say is, keep your judgment at the door or leave because we don't want it. We don't want that. We want the positive environment around us. So thank you for noting that because that's something I've worked really hard on myself to attract those kinds of people to my life and to keep it that way.
Yeah, you definitely have created that. So congratulations
Thank
on
you. Thank
manifesting
you.
that. That's awesome. I know that you have a wonderful free gift that it talks about facing those fears and overcoming those fears. So it is a free digital copy of your #1 international best-selling book, Do It Because You're Scared. And so I wanted to have you tell a little bit about that book and what people can expect when they download that, and I'll share with you how to get it.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Do it because you're scared. The emphasis is on the word because we're talking about empowering ourselves. So when we think about fear, if you think about fear, there are some acronyms out there, face everything and rise, face everything and run, false evidence appearing real. These to me are all kind of like disempowering statements. But when we have fear and we can say, oh, that's just fear. I'm going to do this because I'm scared. You're now empowering yourself with that fear. You're able to use that fear as fuel to fuel you forward instead of to fail you backwards, which is what a lot of us do. We stop because we have fear. We might not recognize that it's fear that's happening. And so what I do now is I ask myself, like, is this fear that I'm experiencing? If my answer is yes, then I say, oh, it's fear. I have to do this because what's on the other side? 99.9% of the fears that you break through, the result is going to be something positive. It's going to be that you did something, you're proud of yourself for doing it. You're patting yourself on the back for it. You met somebody who opened a door that you didn't even know was closed. I'm going to share with you just one of the things that I'm really, oh my God, one of the greatest things I've done that is like, wow, I can't believe I did that because of my fears, right? I did it because I was scared is that I interviewed the president of Mexico, the country Mexico, Vicente Fox, in his presidential suite. Now, that happened because I didn't allow my fear to stop me. And when I walked away from that interview, first of all, I felt confident in that interview. So I walked in there with confidence. But when I walked out of there, I said, wow, that was my Barbara Walters moment.
Wow.
Like I interviewed a president of a country.
And that, like, recognition, then other things that come up, they don't seem quite as scary. If you
Yeah.
recognize those things that you actually did because you were scared. I have someone that I know who has anxiety, and you could, consider that a form of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I'm really impressed with her and really have a lot of respect for her is if she feels anxious about something, then she knows she has to do it, because she said, otherwise I would end up like in a fetal position and just never go anywhere. She said, I would always just go home. I would never say yes to any invitations or, opportunities or whatever. So if she feels fear, if she feels that anxiety, then she kind of forces herself into it. And, sometimes it helps, sometimes she feels better afterwards, sometimes not. But the main thing is that she is empowering herself to not let the fear control her, not let the anxiety control her. So
Exactly.
that's
I love it. Yeah. Because fear is, anxiety is a form of fear. And I came up with an acronym. I think you'll love this acronym is that, I mentioned the false evidence appearing real. And I'm looking at myself and there's nothing false about these fears and they don't appear real. They are real. Like to me,
yeah.
my fears are real. And so I came up with an acronym that faith erases anxious reactions because it's
Ooh,
our the anxiety that's within us. But when we can tap into our faith, see, our faith and fear can't exist at the same time. So it's either your faith is strong or your fear is strong. So if your fear is strong, you have to tap into your faith to make your fear weakened. And so that faith erases your anxious reactions. This is what helps you to move into that space. So if you're experiencing fear, ask yourself, how strong is my faith right now? And then tap into it and go do it because you're scared.
That's great. So I'm going to tell you everyone how to get your book. And
Mm-hmm.
as I'm doing this, and I'm also going to share how they can get in touch with you, because I know there are probably some people that want to work with you, or maybe somebody just wants to have a conversation about your fear journey, overcoming your fears. And so while I'm sharing that, I just want to have you be thinking about this final question. What advice would you give to someone who is having fears that are debilitating them, that are really stopping them from moving forward? And you've given examples of what you did to overcome that. But if someone is really just feeling that debilitation and they want to take the first step, what would be a piece of advice that you could give them? So I'll let you think about that for just a second. To get that free digital copy of Lynda's book, do it because you're scared. Go to actiontakerspublishing.com/do it. And we will have that in the show notes. So you'll be able to go down there and just click on that. Also, you can go to her website, actiontakerspublishing.com, and contact her as well. She does have a way for you to set an appointment with her to actually have a conversation. It's imanactiontaker.com, just all lowercase, all together, imanactiontaker.com. And we'll have that in the show notes as well. So if you want to actually have a conversation with her, you can go there. And she has an Amazon author page. So if you're interested to see what all those 37 #1 international bestseller books are, you can go there, and we'll have that link in the description as well. I also wanted to mention, I mentioned earlier that you were a philanthropist, and you've mentioned a little bit about nonprofit. The Giving Angels is kind of your heart organization, nonprofit organization. And so we're going to have some information in the show notes about that as well, so that if you're interested in that, you can find out a little bit more. So back to our question, Lynda, what advice would you give someone if they're feeling in that place of just really feeling debilitated, of stepping forward because of their fears? What would be the first step that you would encourage them to do?
Yeah, the first thing is to recognize that it is fear. Recognize that. And what I like to do, I'm not sure if this helps. This will help some people, but maybe not everybody. Is to try to figure out, where does that fear stem from? So as I looked through my life, I found that a lot of my fears stemmed from that 5-year-old moment, that I ran away and came back home. And so if you're able to kind of recognize where it stems from, you can work through the pain, the experience that you had way back then, and help you to work through that. And then also just sort of recognizing that you're experiencing fear, you get to decide what you're going to do with that. And then just decide, either do something with it or don't. Letting that fear subside, or that anxiety to rest. One of the ways to do that is to tap into your faith. This is your faith in yourself that you can do it, your faith in your coaches and your mentors, and your faith in God, or your higher, whatever you believe it to be, your higher power, is to tap into those and then decide what you're going to do with it. Decide.
Beautiful. So lots of really great steps. So first of all, recognizing that it is fear. And then if you can, find out where that's stemming from. And then that final step was, remind me again what the final step was.
It was to have faith in yourself,
Have
your
faith in
coaches,
yourself.
mentors, and or, God.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. Have faith in yourself, mentors, and God. And
Yeah.
replacing, because that's replacing the fear with faith, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Lynda. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you being here. It's been a pleasure, my pleasure, having you on the show. And I look forward to getting to know you a little bit more, having more interaction. I know that there's going to be a lot of our listeners that will want to reach out to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Wileen. And this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I appreciate you bringing me in to talk about the fears.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners. And we look forward to having another amazing guest on Get Inspired and Live in Your Power. I really encourage you to share this podcast episode and bring other people over to listen. Until next time, go out and get inspired and live in your power.